Okay, good morning, folks. Please take a minute to locate your mute button on your microphones or on the WebEx, and please mute yourself as we get started. Thank you. We have a few people that are still producing some background noise. Thank you very much. Okay, just so you know, this meeting and WebEx webinar is being recorded, so there will be availability of that later for folks that couldn't make the call. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We have three distinguished guests on our panel today that will be sharing with us their transformation in their districts and the walk and the road leading up to that, as well as the work they've done engaging the district with IMS and their leadership in that. So we have if you haven't muted your phone, please mute your phone. Thank you. So you have Beatrice Arnilles, who is Director for IT Educational Technology at Houston ISD, and Dr. Barbara Nesbitt, Director for Instructional Technology at Pickens County, South Carolina, and Tricia Kennedy, Executive Director at Eclass Transformation at Gwinnett County. And they'll be presenting for each of their districts. So all of the resources from today's webinar will be on our website, and I'm going to take you there quickly because we don't have them there yet, but we do have some I want to share with you at this point. So let me take you over to the K-12 section of our website, and you should be seeing our IMS website. If you put /K12 after our URL, you will see our K-12 website. You can also get to it through the initiative drop-down on our screen. And the K-12 personalized learning will take you to this website. And our website is being reworked. We do expect in the next few months to be launching a new IMS website, so things will change, but the resources will continue to be hosted and posted on our website. So right now we have a number of resources that our I3LC, our Leadership for K-12 Council, has been helping us develop, and a number of you are on the call, and so these documents are currently posted on the IMS website. One of the main documents is the Open Standards Requirement document, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see these documents. So underneath Open Standards, and I'll click on that in a minute. And then we have 4 new documents that have recently been added that are checklists and guidance documents for RFPs. So we have a thin common cartridge, a common cartridge RFP guidance document, an LTI, and most recently a one roster overview. So the Open Standards Requirements document is a good place to start if you want to get an overview of IMS standards and where we see the role of these documents fit in your work with IMS standards in K-12. So this one gives you a high-level overview of all of the different documents. And then if you come back to the main page again, the checklists are set up for each one of the different types of standards that we're dealing with. In this case, the thin common cartridge checklist and RFP language kind of lays out what this is, and then also gives you a checklist for content providers and links to more detailed documents. We have an implementation guide that that defines the use of the specification. We have checklists. The checklist is specific for content providers as well as for tool providers. So we have a little bit of a difference when you're dealing with a tool provider. So for example, someone that provides an LMS or a Learning Object Repository tool in the district, versus the content providers like HMH and Pearson who provide you cartridges. And we want to make sure that you understand the differences there. So this document, this checklist gets you started with a thin cartridge. We have one that gets you started with the common cartridge, which is a little bit different, and you can tell because the body of this document has more specifics. And so please mute your phone if you're not speaking. The full cartridge has a lot more support for different resource types than the thin common cartridge, and the thin common cartridge just being a subset So on the full cartridge, we have QTI assessment items that could be added. We have curriculum, we have discussion forums, and other associated content. We also have embedded files like APIP, the interactive whiteboard format, and EPUB files. So the common cartridge could be a much richer data set. And again, we have a breakout for the checklist in this document, both for tool providers as well as content providers. The LTI checklist is a good document to get started for folks that want to implement both tool provider LTIs in their district or connect up to consumer type tools that can use these. So this checklist helps define those for the district. And then lastly, one of the most recent ones that we added is an overview of the one roster specification that is currently under vote and going into release 1. And this kind of gives you a high-level overview of that specification. The documents that will be shared today by our I3LC district leaders will be posted on the same website after the meeting today. So if you have any questions, please use the chat to post them. And at the end of the presentation, we'll open up for questions and take those live from you. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on our first presenter, Beatrice Arniles, who's Director for IT Educational Technology with Houston. And Beatrice, I will bring up your documents after you get a chance to introduce yourself and talk through what these documents will represent. So Beatrice?
Sorry. Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. We're very happy to be here and working with colleagues. This is truly a group effort, and only through the efforts of several districts working together, we're going to really implement these standards as a common practice in K-12. So we're all very vested in sharing the information we may have and on learning with each other. Houston ISD got involved with IMS Global about 2 years ago when we were doing research for an RFP to hire a digital teaching and learning platform. We wanted curriculum management system, learning management system, and learning object repository. And we run into IMS Global information. So after doing some research, we very rapidly decided that we wanted to adopt IMS Global interoperability standards and request that our vendors adopt the standards as well. And the main purpose, the main goal in this process was to be able to ingest content from the different publishers and content developers that Houston ISD purchases from, including major vendors such as HMH and Pearson McGraw-Hill, but many, many more than those. And one of the biggest and first challenges we encountered as we entered our adoption cycle of the year 2014 and we started talking to vendors was the issue of disseminating information. And when I talk about disseminating information and educating, I mean all the stakeholders. And so we had to think about how to communicate information about the interoperability standards internally to other non-IT, non-technical departments, and also to communicate with our vendors and convince them, not just say, we will do this, you will do IMS Global Standards, or we will do, but to enroll them, to really explain to them the reason behind our decision so that they willingly collaborated with us. As part of such, we wrote some documents that we felt were instrumental in helping us move forward. One of the first things we wrote is actually the second bullet that we call here internally Interoperability for Dummies. The initial document was called Interoperability for Non-Technical Professionals, but when we showed them to our curriculum colleagues, they loved it. We dubbed it the Interoperability for Dummies, and then they happily created the front page, mimicking the collection of book for dummies. And the feedback they gave us was, this was really important for us because this really explained the why. And once they understood what we were trying to do with IMS Global, then our curriculum colleagues were the strongest advocates of our campaign. But another thing we had to do was to write several letters. We wrote several communications, and the letter that Chris has is the latest version of the communication we had with our vendors. Explaining to our vendors the reasons of why we were doing this, and then explaining in a very broad sense the how. And in addition to this letter, which the last version came directly from our chief academic officer to all the vendors from which we were planning to purchase adoption materials. In addition to that, we had shared with our vendors several documents during proclamation for adoption meetings. Finally, as an introduction to this conversation, the big reason, the why of the integration strategy and the adoption of IMS Global ultimately is the urgency for school K-12 organizations and institutions in the USA to come up with a digital content and digital resources solution that is workable in the classroom and that it will in fact improve the teaching and learning environment. One of the things we were trying to resolve was the problem of having teachers and students having to sign to multiple platforms, that is, as many platforms as vendors and publishers, because each one of them sold their content in their own platform with their own login ID and password. In addition to having the difficulty of teachers and students signing in multiple times to multiple platforms, of course, we had the added concern that we were storing student data in hundreds, literally hundreds of platforms. And so that there were student data and analytics lived in locations that we had no control of. I hope I have given a general big picture of the why and some of the how. In addition to these documents, of course, we also had to modify processes. We created an IT Swimlane process clarifying the steps each one of the groups needed to take. It includes the LMS, what is expected of the LMS partners, what is expected of the education technology team in Houston ISD, what is expected of the vendors, etc. And we've had to revise and review our process and our internal documents. And we also ultimately had to write a business requirements document for our vendors that explains to them exactly what form the Thin Common Cartridge or the LTI integrations will take specifically for Houston ISD. So Chris is showing the cover of our digital content interoperability for dummies by Houston ISD. And in the inside of this document, we have a common folk language description of the why are we doing this, and what is it that you achieve with each particular type of IMS Global integration. And so including examples of where are some types of products you would want to integrate as a common cartridge, as a thin common cartridge, or as an LTI. So I think I'm done with my intro, Chris. I know it's really important to give everybody time for Q&A, and I'll let my colleagues talk.
So Beatrice, I'm just going to show the letter that you have too. This is the Houston letter, and this is the most recent one that went out in February. And again, we'll make these available. And lastly, the strategy document. Beatrice, did you want to say anything more about these, or are we good?
I think for now we're good. That way we leave time for the participants to.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Beatrice. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for a minute so I can get back here. Thank you, Beatrice. And again, we'll take questions after we finish up with the presentation. So, Barbara, you're up next, and we appreciate you taking time to represent Pickens County and take us through your stuff. Now, Barbara, in your case, I'm going to drag this little thing over to you, and that will give you control so you can share your screen and talk. So, Barbara, if you go up to the share menu, and then you can share your screen.
All right, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
We're not seeing your screen yet, but I think it's coming.
I think it's still syncing. So
okay.
Let's see. Give it just a second. Can you see it here?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Barbara Nesbitt. I'm with the School District of Pickens County. We're located between Atlanta, Georgia, and Charlotte, North Carolina, near the Greenville-Spartanburg metropolis area. We're a much smaller school district than Houston. We have really a mid-sized school district of about 17,000 students. And so one of the challenges that we've had here in our district is we really believe, as Beatrice was saying, that the interoperability movement and moving toward interoperable digital curriculum is a key to improving student learning as we're moving to blended learning units where teachers have the ability to do some customization of instruction, and especially as we move to personalized learning. And we know that in order to accomplish this, we're going to have to move to a digital curriculum. And so to be digital, with all the kind of plethora of resources that are available to us, it's critical that there's interoperability, particularly as Beatrice was referencing the analytics piece of what's going on, what are the students doing, how are they interacting with the digital curriculum, how can we get that assessment data back so we can make good formative and summative assessment decisions in order to move them along a continuum of learning. So one of the goals that we had here as a district was really knowing what we already had when it came to digital curriculum, not just digital curriculum, but really all of our kind of digital ecosystem, all the things that are involved with our digital ecosystem. And so this was important to us for a couple of reasons. One was the goals being interoperable, but I don't know if any of the rest of you have had this experience, but our financial auditors asked us this fall to come up with a business continuity plan, and it was actually a required action for us to come up with a plan of what we would do if our, say, the building where all of our servers were located were to catch fire or something were to happen. Would we be able to make payroll the next day? Would students still be able to learn? So that was kind of another inspiration behind what I'm going to show you here. And two other reasons for coming up with a presentation I'm going to show you relate to our internal communications with various stakeholders. For example, with our school board, they want to know, why are we spending nearly $5 million on technology? Is that just for laptops for students to use? Or is that just for desktops for secretaries? What exactly is that for? And it helps us communicate with our leadership as well. What is exactly involved in our digital ecosystem? And then last, we're experiencing a transition of leadership where I'm going to, sometime in the next year or two, take over as the Director of Technology, keeping the instructional role with me, and I really needed to know what we have in our district. So what we started with was just coming up with what do we currently have. And we branched everything that we have into 7 key systems that we called our tiers. And so I'm going to first, before I show you what these are, show you this slide screen of our digital ecosystem. And this is just a very big picture view of what we call our digital ecosystem. And you can see that just one area here has to do with servers and internet, bandwidth, computers, the hardware piece. A whole other piece over here is really how students are going to interact with everything digitally in our learning management system. And then we have our data, all of our data stores that house different data. And then up here at the top, we have our digital content. And so we go back here. The different systems that we identified were based in order of some priorities. This here is our Tier 1 hardware system, which obviously switches in your firewall, your servers. And you'll notice the color codes that we have on here relate to our business continuity plan of how we have things backed up. So green is good, red is bad, and yellow means we're making progress. So we can visually see whether we have things backed up, whether it's just data or hardware. Where are we with our very top priority systems and getting things to a point where we would be able to continue if we were to have a disaster. Our Tier 2 systems are actually the processes we have for backing up our data. Our Tier 3 systems are processes for moving data, and I'll come back to this in a minute. Tier 4 are other hardware systems, and we took our hardware systems and basically put them in tiers on whether we would stop everything that we were doing to get it back up and running, and that would have been our first tier. The hardware systems here are the things that we would fix within a day, and then our last tier of hardware systems are things we might wait a week for, things we could do without for a few days before we would have to get it back up and running. And the Tier 6 are the actual web applications that we have and local applications. And then the Tier 7 are end user devices. And this is what people tend to think of when they think of your technology budget. Your PCs, your projectors, your sound system, cameras, tablets, your access points. But as you can see, if you look at all of this, that's a very small part of the overall system that actually lets you use those end user devices. So a couple things just here real quickly. If we look at our data moving processes, we felt it was very important for us to understand exactly how data was transferred amongst our various systems in order for us to, I'm sorry, let me go back there, in order for us to be able to move to interoperability, because interoperability has a lot to do with the moving of data. So we actually mapped out all of our sources that send and receive data. So we know which data stores only send, which applications only receive, and then the ones in the middle that both send and receive. And I've highlighted 4 of these. Our Active Directory, that shows you how all of our systems kind of send and receive data either to or from Active Directory. We have our Lunchbox program, which is another key system. Our Power School, which is our student information system, and we have both kind of automated processes on this screen and manual here. And this is where we really believe the one roster is going to help us tremendously. And then last is our Smart Fusion, which is our staff database. And so all of this right here shows you just how complex the behind-the-scenes infrastructure is on moving data between all of these different systems. And then one other thing I want to show you is here on web applications, what we are starting to map, and we are at the very beginning of this process. I know Houston is a lot further along than we are, but we are color coding all of the things that we have single sign-on for, that we have rostering for, and that we have LTI links, which you can see there's nothing there now in common cartridges. And every 6 months we plan to save this file so we can go back and look at the color differences. This summer we intend to invest several $100,000 into purchasing common cartridges and LTI links so that we can move toward really being interoperable. And then one other thing that I think is important is this is the visual of what we're doing. This is what's easy to show people. But the reality is that what we actually use is we just put this all into a spreadsheet. and Chris will make all of this available, but we have all of this listed, you know, the actual type, if it's a hardware system, the tier that it's in, and then we actually can put cost information, who manages it. I took that off of what we're sharing with you, but on my spreadsheet I have all of that information. And then we have another spreadsheet that shows the actual processes. And it's extremely important, I believe, for if you plan to move to becoming a district that adopts the IMS standards, that you know what you have so that you can work through the process of making your systems operate together to be interoperable. And this helps us even as we've just adopted Schoology as an LMS. And last week they asked us, well, what is everything that PowerSchool sends to, so that they could think through how they can help us. And it was so nice just to come back here and pull up the screen and say, you know, these are the processes and this is how that it works. And let me show one other thing, Chris. This is another along the lines of know what you have. We have all of our textbooks. Every textbook that we have, when we've adopted it, when the adoption expires, who was our publisher. And we send this to our publishers, and we're trying to interact with them about purchasing their cartridges or LTI links, working with single sign-on. And so they can easily look and see exactly what we have in the district that they could support. And last, we have taken Chris's documents that he has shown you, and we have put all that information into a spreadsheet so it's easy for our publishers to just say yes or no and to give us the information back on what they actually support related to each of the textbooks that we're considering purchasing, so that we know up front exactly what we're getting when we make those purchases. So that's and I will say, I told Chris this morning, the one thing I'm still a little confused on is I know that the QTI items don't come into the thin common cartridge, and I would love to know a little bit more about the QTI and the assessment and how other districts are handling the thin common cartridge with the trying to get the QTI cartridges along with the thin common cartridge. But I'll stop there. That's quite a bit.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Barbara. And I'm going to, if that's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and try and take back presenter role, see if it's going to let me do that. Thank you, Barbara, for sharing that. And again, we'll take questions at the end here. Appreciate you very much the time spent on that. And last but not least, Tricia, I finally got your name with your district right on this slide. So thank you for joining us. And I think you said you wanted to show the matrix first, right?
That's right. Well, showing the matrix first.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning to everyone. So as Chris introduced me, I'm Tricia Kennedy with Gwinnett County Schools, which is a northern suburb of Atlanta. We'll have about 175,000 students starting next school year with us. We have 134 schools, and we're growing. We've got 4 new schools coming on this coming year. We're 57% in free and reduced lunch, and that's growing as well. Our lowest percentage school is at 6%, and our highest percent is at 96%, so we have quite a continuum within the district. Our schools from school to school looks very different, and we are diverse in the truest sense of the word. Ethnically, we have 27% white, 31% black, 28% Hispanic, and 10% Asian. And so moving away from the demographics of the district into our work in technology right now, we do have a long-standing history of prioritizing technology for instruction, as I know many of you do, so this isn't a new game for us. We go all the way back to 1998, which was a year into our superintendent's tenure. We have the longest serving superintendent, 20 years this year. And a year into that tenure, he committed to having laptops and home access for every student, every teacher, every teacher, which at the time was very unusual. And in 2000, as far back as in 2000, we put an instructional technology lead teacher position, that is their only role in each building in every school. So a certified teacher that serves as a technology coach in every single building, and that goes back to 2000. So that gives you a little sense of our level of commitment to technology and our superintendent's level of commitment. But in 2011, we made a concerted effort to move to that next level of use of digital content and resources through our Eclass initiative. And so our Eclass initiatives, there are really two components to that. There is effective instructional practices leveraging technology, and then the other component is that infrastructure that gives teachers and students the technology that they need. So we started piloting both that infrastructure as well as the instructional practices that we wanted to see replicated in every school. We started that in 2012, piloting that in 33 of our then 132 schools. And during that pilot, we identified 6 key levers at the building level, because we do have a tremendous amount of building level autonomy in the district. So 6 key levers at the building level that are really critical for that instructional transformation. And that is what we put together in what we call our Eclass matrix of Eclass implementation. And so that's the document that Chris has and will provide to you. I think we're working on maybe getting it up for you. There we go. Green is our Eclass color, so our matrix is in green as well. So just really quickly to run through that with you very high level. Along the left hand, the first column there, you see the 6 components that we identified as being so critical for that instructional transformation at the building level. A strategic plan that is not separate, that does not separate technology, but incorporates it and makes it an overall part of the ongoing school improvement work. Using the tools that we're providing as a part of the initiative to support the school improvement work and how consistently and pervasively those tools are being used. The instructional practices themselves and what's happening in the classrooms with instruction. And we are making use of the Florida Department of Ed's Technology Integration Matrix to show our teachers examples of the type of practices that we want to happen in the classroom, really because of the power of the videos in that matrix. If you're not familiar with it, you can Google it. And they've got a video for each of the 4 core areas in across all of the cells of the matrix. So we found those video examples to be really powerful for our teachers. Innovators is the next component. We found that the best way to build capacity is really peer-to-peer. And so our schools have identified early adopters, or we call them innovators, a team of those innovators at each school. And then the district is pouring our time and our resources and our training into that group of those early adopters, those teachers. And then those teachers are serving as peer coaches and peer-to-peer leaders to help build that instructional capacity. Then the next component, professional development. Our schools, because of their degree of autonomy, have a great deal of site-based professional development as well. And so we want to see that they are incorporating and using technology in that PD at the school level. And then finally, certainly not least, is leadership. And we do expect our building level leaders to be modeling use of technology and making it a way of doing business in their schools. And so across the continuum there, you see that it moves from the teacher using the technology to student use and student choice, and it moves from an intentional embedded use of technology as a consistent and pervasive way of teaching and learning. So that is a matrix that our schools use, and they do a self-analysis on where they are, and the expectations for the schools is that they're on the matrix and they're moving to the right, and they've got plans to move to the right. So that's the instructional component, the work we're doing there. But we also then have that infrastructure that we began to build or add on to in 2011 with 2 components, a best-of-breed model. We have made purchases or in the process of purchasing a professional development and evaluation tool, a learning management system, a new assessment system, and a new student information system. We also have made a commitment to BYOD and mobile readiness. And so with that infrastructure, we have a vision for integration and it being a one-stop shop through a single sign-on portal, as well as digital content at the learning object level, and then that data integration that both Beatrice and Barbara have spoken to, as well as being priorities. So we quickly realized the need for interoperability standards as we started down that pathway and got involved with the IMS Global Consortium as a result. Our first step was really educating our own team, and we found great support from Chris and his team and the others at IMS. They've been on site for us a couple of times working with both our curriculum staff to help them understand the importance of interoperability, as well as with our technical staff. Concurrently, though, we've also been working with our existing digital content and application partners and began making those requests of them. So there's been a lot of back and forth at the table. A lot of it has been just really conversations rather than it being contractual. We recognized early on that it was going to need to be a multi-year effort as we go through adoption cycles, as we start to adopt new materials and have the budget for that, then establishing those expectations with our partners and our vendors, or as we're looking for new procurement, really coming to the table with those vendors. And we've put our money where our mouth is, and this year we've achieved LTI certification for our own district portal to model that importance, but also just to make it easier for us to do the integration that we have the vision for. So like I said, we've been at the table with providers around interoperability since 2012, but we recently have put together what I would call a defining document, and that's the other document that Chris has. It is our digital content interoperability guideline. So you'll have access to this, but just to point out quickly a couple of things. At this point, we are requiring our partners to make a commitment to moving toward and achieving certification, and that's noted on page 3 in kind of the introduction. And we also have identified LTI and STENCOM and Cartridge as priorities for us, but it's a dynamic document, so we'll be adding things. Like, for instance, we know we're going to be looking very carefully at and expect to add one roster as a priority. We've identified desired elements and behaviors from our partners, and that's listed on page 4 of the document. So we tell them up front, this is what we really need you to do with the applications and or the content you're providing for us. Then we have some documents that we expect them to work through. We have a general certification questionnaire. It's very similar to some of the documents that Chris showed at the beginning that IMS is now has out on their website, where we ask them where they are with interoperability standards. And then we go to a next level of detail with a very specific LTI questionnaire, which is attachment D2. And in that, we even include samples of data fields, and that came from lessons learned as we worked with partners who were LTI compliant, but when we really started digging down into things, recognized that in some field choices they had selected different options. And we realized that up front we needed to be asking a little bit more even about what those specific field choices were. So we've given them samples of the LTI and the fields that we are using. And then finally, we've gone above and beyond even the IMS and the interoperability standards, and in this document we also have some security standards and processes and practices where we've included our expectations, our requirements around sensitive and secure information, around disaster recovery, around incident handling, and even around screening of employees. So we're now using this document anytime we bring a content provider and or an application provider to the table as we start working with them so that they know up front what our expectations are around interoperability. And just like with Houston's documents that they had provided to IMS, we feel like a lot of the things that have been developed now and are on the IMS site will really help, because that's what we really pulled from, is those documents in order to create our own documents. So, Chris, that's what I have to share.
Well, Tricia, this is great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we are going to now open up for questions. And I'm going to check my chat here. I don't think I have anyone that has chatted. Any questions in? So you can unmute your phones and ask questions. Not all at once, but hopefully we do have some questions. Anyone? We have a question from Felix on chat, and it says, how are we tracking the project's PMO in all 7 tiers? And I guess that's directed at Barbara. How are you tracking the projects in all 7 tiers, the PMO side?
Well,
Barbara, you want to take it?
I'm here. I'm not quite sure I understand, how are we tracking our progress as we move along, or I'm not sure I understand the question.
Felix, can you give us a little bit more background on your question? I'm just reading that off the chat, so if there's anyone else that has a question in the meanwhile, we could take that. Felix?
Yes, this is Felix. I lost connection here with my audio, but I was kind of curious as to how some of the teams. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Felix.
Okay, thank you. How some of the teams are keeping track of the projects. I'm a project manager with HISD Project Management Office, and I know that a lot of other school districts have so many other projects. I just wanted to know if you all had a specific project management office in your districts.
Yes, we do not. Unfortunately, we are a small team of 4 people who are managing that whole sheet that you saw. And so our offices are connected and we see each other every day. In my office, I actually have all of those sheets up on our board. And we come in here frequently and make reference to them, and we track how are we the progress toward especially the tier 1 backup systems are really critical to us. It's our goal to have all of those backed up by through this summer, to have a plan for that. And then we're also moving forward on the single sign-on and the rostering. And so we actually have kind of all of those sheets up on our board, but we keep track of that really inside that Excel spreadsheet. And we kind of, as things change, it's easy for us to keep track of it there. But it's a whole lot easier in many ways in a district our size than it is, say, in a really large district. So I don't really have a protocol or a standard of how you would do this in a district, say, 10 times our size, where you would have a lot more people working on various projects.
Okay.
This is Beatrice. Felix works with me, and I think Barbara is right on when she says that in a large district, what Barbara showed is run by 3 different departments in our district. Houston ISD is 215,000 students, and Felix is a part of our PMO, Project Management Office, and Felix is helping us manage all the interoperability standards, integration process. And it would be interesting to know if Gwinnett has anything in place, or our system is quite complicated, but I'm sure we could work with Chris in putting together with Felix all the different ways in which we're managing the process.
This is Tricia, and we do have project management on site. We have work streams. I mentioned that we have 10 components of our initiative, and we have a work stream around each of those components. So we've identified staff members, and they meet weekly or bi-weekly, and we have project management resources attached to each of those teams. And one of the teams is an integration team, so it's someone that pulls from all of those different work streams And so we are using project plans and tracking milestones and tasks and across all of those teams. And we have a collaboration site. We actually have a collaboration application. And so all of our documents are filed there and available. The project plans and the trackers and we have bi-weekly project lead meetings, and those meetings are where we escalate anything that's at risk from any of the work streams and have conversations around whether or not we need to then escalate that up to an executive level. About once every 2 months, we have an executive cabinet meeting where we report out progress. So those are the project management structure that we're using in Gwinnett.
It sounds very similar to what we're using, Tricia.
I'm sure. I think project management is project management, just anywhere you go, right?
That's right. That's right.
I have one question on chat. Actually, one comment and a question. One is about LTI request or the requirement for LTI launch links. Could we maybe share from each district how we're going about requesting, making the requirements for LTI launch links? And so I think we want to do that one offline. Maybe we can collect that information and post it along with our documents. And I think the comment is that if we can collaborate on kind of making those similar, that it would help with the adoption side of things. And then I have one question from the audience about metadata, and the question is, how are the districts compiling / analyzing metadata from multiple sources to support student learning? Are you folks using tools, dashboards? What are you doing to compile and analyze the metadata from multiple sources? Any comments from the three presenters?
I would like a little clarification. We had to deal with the metadata as soon as we started ingesting thin common cartridges. We ingested very rapidly the HMH thin common cartridges, but because we had the bulk of our adoptions were from HMH, then the metadata was very consistent, and it was like a number of different courses. As soon as we started ingesting Pearson and McGraw-Hill, we very rapidly realized that we had to prepare some kind of document or protocol for metadata for Houston ISD. And we wrote our first, quote, business requirement document in March that specified what were the requirements for a thin common cartridge for Houston ISD. And it had a special section just about how to tag the metadata. And we are still revising that. We continue to mature the process. This is a very early, we're at a very early stage. Houston ISD has ingested about 50 cartridges, and it's our first year of ingestion, so it's very much a learning as we go. And actually, we would love to have this conversation with Tricia and Barbara and any other districts that would like to discuss with us the question of how to ingest the metadata so that we can be consistent, so that when we do searches in our library, the searches are also consistent.
And I'd like to add to that, Trish, that in the next several years, the technology from LMS providers and other software to be able to connect learning profiles of students with assessment data and the objects in your repository to where you can have recommendations for student learning based on learning styles and progress, I think is going to mature. And so it's critical that the metadata around the objects or the assets in your, whatever your object repository or learning management system is, it's critical that the metadata is good data, or we'll find ourselves in a position where you've got 50,000 assets that are not usable for the purpose of making recommendations for personalization of learning down the road. And so in some ways, I think that still is some uncharted territory.
It is, we've started talking, these 3 districts and many other districts. Chris can give you more information about that. We started talking about developing a standard for how to tag learning standards, a standard of standards, so to speak, because of this very reason.
Patricia, any
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I'll stick with my colleagues. We are in a similar place with Houston as far as having a list of metadata that we want and expect from our providers, especially our content providers. But we then sit down at the table with each one and and still are working through that. We also, one other thing I think that speaking to what Barbara was saying about the need for that standardization of the metadata, and in order to get to the place of that personalization engine, we're taking some baby steps in that direction, working with IBM as a strategic partner in developing an analytics engine. And one of the things that's been the most challenging for us is identifying that metadata, and then not just identifying what the fields are going to be, but then also categorizing content based on a student's learning needs. That's been a challenge in that process for us.
And I think as much as all of this is a challenge for the districts that just commented, I think we also have the same challenge with the publishers. One of the things you'll notice on our checklist is that we leave it up to the district to ask for specific metadata, and we also so that because there's so much metadata that can be provided, we kind of leave it up to them to say. And so what we're seeing now is that districts are asking specifically, what metadata are you providing, and being able to track that. So I think over time we'll get better at being able to ask for very specific metadata. So thank you for that comment. And we had a question about OneRoster. And maybe the 3 districts can answer this. If you are looking at OneRoster, are you looking at doing the services, which is the REST APIs for the OneRoster? Are you going to be looking at the CSV implementation? So OneRoster has both a CSV implementation as well as services implementation. And so I don't know if you guys are ready to speak to that, but we have a question from the audience. Which one are you planning to adopt?
This is Beatrice from Houston, and Houston is going to implement the CSV version this year. And as far as we know, Orange County is the one that's implementing the full version of the OneRoster this year. But Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So we're taking baby steps. We're going to go with the CSV version this year, and we'll move from there.
Okay. And Tricia, I know you're working on one, right?
We are, but I'm not sure if we've made a decision yet around services versus CSV.
Okay.
And we're looking. We are probably going to go with the services if we it is our desire. So we're still working through that.
Okay.
But we're actually going to work with ClassLink. I know Stan's on the call, but we're actually looking at setting up the OneRoster server. And we may this year do both, depending on our vendor's readiness. It is our strongest desire to move to the service, though, because it's so much easier to manage. I'm not sure how many publishers are ready for it, though.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we're early on all fronts. So, okay, I have no more questions in the chat at this point. Are there any questions from other folks on the call? And we are wrapping up. We're coming up on the top of the hour, so we'll be wrapping this up shortly. Maybe one more question from the audience?
Yes, I have a question regarding the information that Pickens presented, especially there was an image that they presented with the single sign-on, the LTI, the common cartridge, and there was something else that if you click on that, it represents you, it highlights those applications that are connecting via rostering or LTI or single sign-on. Is that information available to all your customers in your district, or is it just information for the IT department?
Right now, that information is just for our IT department. As we move toward having, and actually if it was shaded out, it meant that it was not, and because Chris is going to make that available. So if it was kind of grayed out, it was not ready yet. We hope that we're going to have this summer a lot more, you know, implementations of the rostering, the single sign-on, LTI, and common cartridge. But that is something that we do plan very soon to post publicly. We kind of run and, you know, have to run some of the information and all by our lawyers. Some of this, I'm not sure if everything can be made public or not, but yeah, that's obviously something that we want to share with our teachers because we want them to know what we're working for them for ease of operability.
And that's exactly what I'm referring to, so the teachers know what connects how.
That's right. And so, like I say, I think it's important that they know what we're working on a global scale. I don't know, you know, some of them don't, that's not on their radar screen at all, but I do think they find a lot of confidence knowing what our overall vision is and how we're moving toward it and how we are able to track our progress. And obviously right now, we're at the beginning. We think it will be interesting, like every 6 months, to be able to compare those graphics and say, here's where we were, you know, in summer of 2015, here's where we are December of 15, here's where we are, you know, spring of 16. And as they see that we're trying to really help them to have what they need to personalize learning for students. It's daunting for teachers to think of how to use technology in a digital world, and they appreciate knowing that we kind of know our stuff, at least as much as we can, and that we're really trying to figure all this out to make things easier for them.
Yeah, thank you. I really like the way you all presented that information. It's a very simple way of figuring out what's available through which integration means. Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to especially thank our presenters today for jumping on the call. I know, Beatrice, especially, we want to thank you. We know you had experienced part of the flooding in Houston, and we were so sorry to hear that. We hope things are going well. I'm going to ask that if folks would take a second before dropping off to post in the chat your feedback on this webinar. Just a short comment would be great. And I'm going to ask Barbara and Tricia and Beatrice if they would hop on my conference bridge, and I'll send that information to you. Thank you again all for being on the call today, and we look forward to the next presentation.
Thanks, Chris.